Hello and welcome. My name is Raiden Edseth-Griffin, and as you can see, I'm in a different place. Those first few videos were recorded in my student accommodation while I was studying abroad in Scotland, and now I'm home. We'll change places again in August, where I'll be back at American school. And then this is my last year of American school, so I should be back wherever I land for the foreseeable future after that. But that's part of the explanation for why it's taken me another month to make a video. Other than that, I've just been lazy. I've also been trying to figure out a good place to shoot these videos at home. The lighting situation isn't great. I feel like I'm in an interrogation room right now, so if this video feels a little sinister to you, you're not alone. But I thought the important thing was just to make another video, worry about the lighting later, we can fix that in future things. For now, let's talk about circles. Circles are a restorative justice tool that I've talked about before in the decolonizing RJ video, but this is the dedicated restorative justice circle process video. RJ circles as a tool are used for lots of things, but mostly they're a place for dialogue to happen. This dialogue can be about conflict, it can be about celebration, it can be about feelings. Really, a circle is about opening dialogue for people to express their needs and for their community to help them meet those needs. To me, it's also very important that circles are considered a sacred space. And what I mean by a sacred space is that one, we make time for it, no matter what, no matter how long a circle is going to take, we make the time for it. We, if we have to, we clear out the rest of our schedules for that day and we have the circle for as long as we need to. Most circles that I've been in are maybe 30 to 45 minutes. Some are shorter. Many I've been in have been much longer. It kind of depends on how many people are there and what we're talking about. And as someone who runs circles, I can try to guess how long a circle is going to be, but I have kind of found to just not even bother. Some people do. Some people have very rigid, like strict scheduling for their circles, but I find that the best circles I've been in have not had any notion of how long they're going to be. It's more about following the flow of the dialogue. Another important part of the sacredness of circles is that they're confidential. I like to say what's said in circle stays in circle, and what's learned in circle leaves circle. That just means if somebody shares something private or vulnerable, we're obviously not going to go out and share that with everyone we know, but the lessons we learn in circle and what we learn about how to take care of each other, we use that in the rest of our lives. So, circles are an important tool in a restorative justice practitioner's kit, but they're not the only tool. Particularly with folks who are new to the restorative justice space, I find that a lot of people tend to conflate restorative justice and circle process as one thing, but that's not really the case. As I said, circles are a tool for restorative justice practitioners, but they're not the only one. They're an important one, but not the only one. And we'll talk about different ones later. This is just a very popular one that people talk about in non RJ spaces sometimes. And so I think it's an important one to talk about first. So we know that circles are about dialogue, but what is a circle? What do they look like? What makes a circle a circle? Let's talk about that. There are some essential pieces of a circle. The first essential piece of a circle is that everybody present is sitting, usually sitting or standing or whatever agreed upon comfortable position in a circular orientation. That way, nobody is at the front of the circle, nobody's at the back. Everybody can see each other very easily. It seems a little bit silly for someone who has never experienced it, but the actual sitting in a circle is pretty important. It helps to create a space where everybody is able to be seen, able to be heard. Everybody is sort of equal. Sitting in a circle where everybody can see you and you can see everybody can also feel very vulnerable. Someone I know has expressed to me that when they're in circle, they feel really uncomfortable. They don't like that everybody can see them. They don't like that they can see everybody. And they don't like talking in circle because they don't like having the floor. And that's perfectly understandable. That's why circle is not the only thing we do. So, whereas sitting in a circle is about half symbolic, half practical. And then this next piece is mostly practical and a little bit symbolic. We're talking about the talking piece or the talking stick. The talking stick, if I'm not mistaken, comes to us from those original indigenous cultures who were doing circle process. The talking piece is the more modernized thing where it's not necessarily a stick, but it's something that we pass around the circle to where when you have the talking stick, there's a fly in here. For when you have the talking stick, or the talking piece rather, you are the one who has the opportunity to talk, and everyone else has the opportunity to listen without needing to respond. And I say opportunity because you can always pass when you have the talking piece. You don't have to share anything, but it's important that everybody gets the chance to. Should I do another take of that because of the fly? No. A talking piece can be just about anything. I find a pretty popular one is just a stuffed animal or a fidget toy. That's probably because I work with a lot of young people, middle and high schoolers. But, I think anyone likes a stuffed animal every once in a while. It's always fun as a circle keeper or someone who's just running the circle to bring a talking piece that means something and has a story with it. You don't have to do that, but I find it helps to create a space where we can be vulnerable and be honest and be a little personal when we start the space off by talking about what's this talking piece? What does it mean to me? So, yeah, just to nail it home on the how do you use a talking piece? A circle keeper, someone who's running the circle, will introduce a topic of conversation for this round. Then they will either answer the question themselves immediately or they will pass the talking piece to the person next to them and it will go down the line and each person will get the chance to talk or respond to the prompt or share whatever they need to share. And everyone else will listen during that time. And then we just keep passing the talking piece around until it gets back to the circle keeper. And at which point they have the opportunity to share, or if they already did, they can introduce the next prompt. That's how it works. That's it. Oh, and sometimes this is maybe even a little goofier than just sitting in a circle. A few times I haven't had a talking piece, or I've been in a circle where there was no talking piece, and we passed around energy. We sort of pretended there was a talking piece in our hands, and we passed it around. A little goofy, a little improv 101 maybe, but it works. You don't need to necessarily have something physical. It's just important. The idea is to give everybody an equal opportunity to share what's on their mind, what they need to say, share their story. The next essential piece of a circle is the centerpiece. The centerpiece, a little bit contrary to what I said earlier, is what you have in the middle of the circle. So we know we have everyone sitting in a circle, and oftentimes there could be nothing in the middle, and that would be fine, maybe. But having a centerpiece, something in the middle for everyone to rest their eyes on, might help that person who doesn't, want everyone's eyes on them, or want to be looking at everybody else in the face. And it gives us a place to hold things. By hold things, I mean we literally just set things down in the centerpiece in the middle of the circle. For instance, if we want to suspend the talking piece and just have like sort of an open discussion, which I've done many times, you can put the talking piece in the centerpiece, and so everyone knows where it is. For a centerpiece, I often like to have one of those sort of round tapestries. It's good to keep it circular, I guess. And in there, you can put fidget toys for people who need to be doing something with their hands. You can put note cards and pens for any sort of activity you want to do with note cards and pens. Um, there are lots of things you can keep in a centerpiece, including the next piece I'm going to talk about. But more on that after this. A centerpiece probably shouldn't be anything too big, like a table. Maybe if it's a low table, like a little coffee table, that could be fine. But you don't want it to obstruct anyone's vision of the other participants. The point of a centerpiece is for people to look at it, somewhere to rest their eyes, and also to help create a space. It curates the vibe that you're going for, I guess, in the circle. So, for instance, my centerpiece, which was made by my mom, is a quilted circle that has blues and greens all over it. And those, other than just being some of my favorite colors, tend to be considered very soothing colors. And I tend to run very chill vibes in my circles. I think cool colors tend to work best in general. But I've seen some very nice, very beautiful reds and oranges in centerpieces, and I haven't been worked up about it. It really depends on the circle you're having, what kind of centerpiece you want, and it doesn't have to be something so formal. You don't have to lay down a big, beautiful tapestry or anything. It can be something as simple as a fishbowl full of little fidget doodads, or even some candy if you really want. It can be nice and simple if that's all you have. Or if you're all sitting on the floor, you can just have one big picnic blanket. The next essential part of a circle is values. You know I love values. Values are an important part of the circle because it's a community. And as I said in the values video, circles help to curate your community. So at the start of a circle group coming together, it can often be very valuable, hey? It can often be very useful to do that values activity I talked about and come to a consensus on what values you want to have in this space. And the reason I said your centerpiece can hold your values is because, like I said in the values video, you can write them down on note cards and you can put them in your centerpiece so you can come back to them later. It's also important to have those values written down or just somewhere where you know you can refer back to them, because then you can edit them. If it comes to be that, someone in the group isn't following your values, that doesn't necessarily mean that you need to kick them out or anything. It might mean that they can't because of something going on in their life. I would lean towards changing whatever value is a problem for them, finding something else that you can all agree on. Or maybe they can't follow the value because they're just not meant for the space, and that's fine too. The last part of circles I want to talk about is kind of two parts in one. It depends who you ask, whether this is one part or two parts, but it's guidelines and agreements. Guidelines are kind of like values in that everyone present needs to be able to follow them, but these are less negotiable than values. And that's because these guidelines are things like follow our values, respect a talking piece, maintain confidentiality. These are the sorts of things that are absolutely non-negotiable for any circle, regardless of the circle's values. Agreements, on the other hand, come at the end of a circle. Agreements are what everyone present agrees they are responsible for leaving the circle. So in the instance of a circle for repairing harm between two people, these agreements are largely for those two individuals, the primary stakeholders, to agree what they're going to do moving forward for their relationship. That might mean just not talking to each other, not bothering each other. It might mean doing specific things to repair the harm between them. And everybody else present also has agreements, ways that they can support these two people to repair that harm. Agreements are useful in other circles as well. Even if it's something as innocuous as a celebration circle, it can be important to say, hey, moving forward, let's agree that we're going to have some smaller, less formal celebrations to celebrate each other and all the good work we're doing. Agreements and values are also very useful for follow-up circles. So most circles don't happen as a one-off thing. Typically, first of all, there's a lot of wind-up, and we're going to talk about that. But there's also follow-ups to make sure we're meeting our agreements and we're actually following through on repairing that harm or whatever we had that circle about. It's not so much about policing each other a little bit. We're holding each other accountable, for one. But two, we're checking in on each other. We're making sure we're all doing okay. And if we aren't able to follow some of those agreements, then we can figure that out. We can change them, just like we do with the values. We can find something that does work for everyone involved. So those are the essential pieces of what makes a circle, what makes a circle restorative. And that comes to an interesting question, which is, If any one of those is not present in a circle, can it still be called restorative, or can it still be called a circle? You might be able to guess based on the language I've used so far, but I tend to lean on the side of no, because the way I was taught these things is that that's what a circle is. That's what a restorative circle is. And if you're not doing those things, it's not a restorative circle. But at the same time, I understand that not everybody does things the way I was taught to do them. And I think really the important thing is that as long as it works, as long as it's working for you and your community, then it's working. And that's fine. It doesn't matter so much to me if we put the label of restorative on it. It matters that it's working. And so if any of these things that make a circle don't mesh with your needs or your community's needs, the important thing is not that you do them so rigidly, I think. I think the important thing is that you fulfill the purpose that each of these parts is meant to fulfill. So in the case of sitting in a circle, you have to create a space where everyone feels equal and everyone has the opportunity to speak and be heard and be seen. Same goes for talking piece. Like I said, you don't even need a physical talking piece. You just need to make sure everyone has the opportunity to speak and be heard. Next, let's talk about the process of a circle, how a circle comes to be. You may have heard me say, or may have heard others say, circle process, as opposed to just circle or RJ circle, whatever. That's because circle is not an isolated incident in almost any case. First of all, and this one is absolutely a non-negotiable, this is not like what I was just talking about. Circle must be voluntary for everybody involved. If someone doesn't want to be there and doesn't want to participate in the circle, you're not having a circle. You can't force anyone to participate. That's also why circles are not the only tool of a restorative justice practitioner. If it's going to be voluntary, then not everyone's going to do it. And of course, the way you figure out, one, that you're doing a circle, and two, that everyone involved wants to do it, is that you do what has been called, in my particular experience, pre-conferencing. I think that's a very clinical term. It's not my favorite, but it does the job. Pre-conferencing is essentially meeting with everyone who's going to be in the circle beforehand, individually, and talking about what the circle is going to be about. First, do we want to have a circle? And then what the circle is going to be about, what are some of the guidelines that need to be in place, if there's any absolutely off-limit topics, that kind of thing. Pre-conferencing is a space for you as the practitioner or the circle keeper to get a sense of what's going on between two people. Actually, you kind of need to know what's going on between two people. And pre-conferencing is a great way to do that. And of course, if at any point in any of the pre-conferencing that happens, anybody involved says they don't want a circle, they want to figure this out some other way, then you're not having a circle. That's the absolute cutoff. That's part of why you pre-conference, so no one feels like they're being forced into anything. Because when people feel forced into having a conversation, then they're not going to be super active in the conversation, or they're going to be active in a very, I don't want to say negative way, but in a way that doesn't contribute to repairing a harm or whatever the circle is about. For instance, and I can say, unfortunately, I've had moments where I've been too wrapped up in the get it done mindset because it was my job, where I may have made some folks feel a little forced into circle, and those circles didn't go well. They sucked. They sucked for everyone involved. And immediately after, I knew what went wrong, because I was like, they didn't want to be there. I knew they didn't want to be there. But I was so wrapped up in trying to fix everything and trying to get it done that I kind of pushed people into it. And so I can tell you from experience, it doesn't work. That's part of what keeps circle process and restorative justice in general from being effective in a top-down organization. Because if you can't force people into it, then you're not imposing power. In that very corporate, punitive paradigm that is so pervasive in our culture, it's just never going to work that well. And maybe that's a flaw, because that means you have to either convince these very corporate, punitive mindset people and organizations to change, or they're going to try this thing and it's not going to work, and then they're just going to immediately toss it out forever. And yeah, maybe that is a bit of a flaw, but that's a marketing flaw. In terms of process, I think it's absolutely the right way to go. Also, before any circle actually happens, there is a scripting process. And I'm not saying that circles are scripted and you know everything that's going to be said beforehand. I mean that you, as the circle keeper or practitioner or whatever you're going to call it, have a plan. In my work, we've called these scripts because you come in with a piece of paper that has the rounds of the things you want to introduce for people to discuss with the talking piece, and it kind of looks like a script. Um, but I honestly think even calling it a script is a little misleading, because it's just having a plan, knowing what you want to talk about, the direction you want to go, and also understanding, especially as you get more experienced as a practitioner, understanding that the value is not in the plan, it's in the planning. All right, before we move on, let's take a moment to celebrate this milestone in my YouTubing career, which is that yesterday I spent about an hour in front of this camera recording this video, only to, at the end of it, learn that it was only recording for about 30 minutes. So, I'm back here to finish this video. Let's see if I can pick up where I left off and do all the same good stuff I did yesterday. So I will often be 5 or 6 minutes into running a circle with a script and decide we don't need the script, we're going to follow the vibe. Following the vibe of the circle, where it's going, not where you planned for it to go, is an important skill to have, and one a circle keeper develops over time. Most circle keepers don't start off being able to do that. And of course, there's all this lead up to circles, but there's also what comes after circles, which is generally some kind of follow up. These can be follow up conferences one on one, or they can be follow up circles. I tend to prefer doing follow up circles over follow up conferences because it helps to create that culture of normalizing circles. But not every organization can really accommodate that, and not every circle needs that, frankly. The point of follow ups is to see, first of all, are we all following through on those agreements that we made in the original circle? But also just to see how people are doing, just checking in, keeping up that maintenance. It can be easy, especially for people higher up in an organization that are introducing all this new RJ stuff, to think that having a circle is the end of it. You have the circle and it's all fixed, it's all good. But that's almost never the case. It often takes a lot of follow up just to make sure we're following through on these things, especially early on when you've just introduced all this stuff to your community, your group of people. The last part I want to talk about of what makes circle process such a process is that all this takes so much time. The time is very important. Our culture places a large emphasis on efficiency and urgency, but restorative justice and circle process really, really tries to fight that. That's because time to RJ practitioners is sacred. Time in general is sacred. And time being so sacred means we don't want to rush through anything. It's a little counterintuitive, maybe coming from that culture of urgency, but really taking the time that things need is essential to good, effective RJ process, RJ practice, and circle process. All of these things that are so laborious, such a process, they are pretty essential. They promote effectiveness in this larger process and in these practices. These are what make it all work. Now, we've talked a lot about circles in general, and I've kind of been focusing on circles for repairing the harm, but there are lots of different kinds of circles. Circles can be used for celebration, for supporting someone who's going through some sort of struggle. Circles can be used for teaching. Circles are used for community building. I tend to group circles into two camps: circles that are reactive, which are the ones people tend to think of, like repairing the harm circles, and circles that are proactive, and those are your community building circles mostly. Reactive circles happen in response to some event or some conflict, And proactive circles are meant to build a community of people that value circle and restorative justice in general. And that's an important thing to do if you're trying to get people to buy in to restorative justice, because you need people to buy in if you're going to do this, because all of it is entirely voluntary. People need to believe that it works if they're going to participate. And the way you get people to believe that it works is to have them experience it and show them that it works. Getting people to participate in the more innocuous circles, just getting to know each other, helps them be more comfortable in circle and more willing to participate in those more vulnerable ones. It also helps you as an RJ practitioner to get a feel for what your community's needs are around circle. For instance, if you have someone who feels really uncomfortable being put on the spot, you can find some form of accommodation for them when they're in circle. Now I want to talk about the ritual of it all when it comes to circles. There's a lot of, it almost feels like some formality. You need to have all these things, it needs to take all this time, and it sounds really tedious sometimes, but it's pretty important to the process, at least for the way I've learned it. The way I was taught these things is that every part of circle has a purpose, and if you don't have all these different things, then it's not really a circle, or it's not really restorative. This is a very rigid view of restorative justice, and I think it has its benefits, but also its problems. For one, really ultimately the important thing is that it's working, that it works for your group. If the rigid rules and structure that I have introduced and that I'm used to aren't working for a group, then I need to change those rules and that structure to work for this group. So the rules are there, they're intended to be helpful, but sometimes they're not. Sometimes they get in the way. And that's when you need to change them. But I still think it's important to know the rules, learn them, practice them, because you're not going to know how to break them effectively unless you know how they work in practice. So, yeah, for me personally, this ritual of it all is very important. I can get a little attached to my rules, my process. And when I see an organization that claims to be doing restorative stuff, but they don't do it the way I was taught, I can get a little, I can get a little fixy. I try to correct them. But really, if I'm there in an advisory capacity, my goal is not to make them do it the way I would do it. It's to get them to do it in a way that works for them. But I still think some stuff is just too essential to leave out, like sitting in a circle, or at least in some way where everyone can be seen, and also having a talking piece or some way for everyone to have the opportunity to speak. That stuff is pretty non-negotiable for me. Now, wrapping up this video, let's talk about you. Let's talk about how you can use circle process in your life. Odds are you probably don't have restorative justice training or circle keeper training. Maybe you do, and that's great, and you can use some of this advice I've given you. But if you don't, because you're the average Joe, and that's fine, then what can you do? How can you use all this stuff I've just been talking about? Well, for one, you can seek out that training. You can become a circle keeper and you can run circles for people in your life. But you don't have to, and you don't always have the time to run circles and go through all this process if you're a busy person. Instead, you can introduce the concepts of circle and the reasoning behind circle into your relationships. What I mean by that is taking all those different parts of circles that we talked about and taking the purpose behind each of them, which we did talk about, and finding other ways in your life and your relationships to fulfill those purposes. So in the case of just sitting in a circle, you can use that and just hold your work meetings sitting in a circle. That'd be great. But you can also find other ways to make sure that everyone feels seen, feels visible, isn't left out. Or in the case of using a talking piece, you can just hold your meetings in such a way that everybody gets a chance to speak on everything, instead of, raise your hand if you have an idea about this, because that can lead to favoritism or, one person dominating the conversation, whether it's intentional or not. That's why I talked about the reasoning behind all these different facets of the circle process, is so you can find your ways of serving those purposes. And I think that's it for this video. There's always more to talk about when it comes to circles. I could tell some specific stories. I could run a circle on camera. That could be kind of cool. But for now, I think you've got an idea of how circles work and why they're an important tool in an RJ practitioner's toolkit. So I guess I'll see you in the next one.